Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, February 20th. It kind of feels a little Friday-ish, doesn't it? Every button press is just a little late. We're running out of steam toward the end of the week, and who knows? I feel like there's a little cold coming on. One of those days. So we're dragging, but hey, dragging. But anyway, levels are 5x5, so the computers are working just fine. That's good news. That's not always the case, so I guess we should be happy when we've got that going for us, which is nice. Plenty to catch up on. Too much, really, to catch up on. We're just way behind the fire hose of crazy stories out there. And true to form, there's yet more every single day, every morning to wake up to. And I guess it's all part of the plan. Just layer on more piles of stories on top of the ones you didn't even get to. And then finally, when you look back and say, why didn't we cover this earlier? You're disappointed with yourself instead of the people who did this to you. I guess it's part of the plan. Seems to be working just great. Keeping us busy anyway. I think this Friday, usually Donald Trump by now has got his plans to fly out for the weekend and go play golf somewhere. I suspect, I don't know, I'm getting the feeling, is he playing less golf? Or I think he's actually going to the golf course less and playing less golf. I think there are times that he goes to the golf course and doesn't actually play golf. He dresses up like he's going to play golf and walks around and socializes with people as though he's just played around, but is doing less and less of it. I think he's stuck in D.C. for the weekend for a number of reasons, not the least of which, well, I don't know that he would consider himself stuck in D.C. for this. He may very well have in olden days, gone down to Florida and attacked Iran from there. We've obviously seen him before have people bring in black draping, or what do they call it, pipe and draping, and put up room barriers that they would ordinarily use to, very secure things that they would ordinarily use to, say, hide the buffet during a gala dinner until it was time, until it had been readied and could be revealed to the crowd. and so block off a portion of the Pervalago ballroom and pretend it's a secret underground secure bunker of some kind for the president to direct operations from. We've actually seen them literally do that before. They're really not good at this stuff. But apparently top of mind for him, I guess, if there is one in there, is he has done enough saber rattling that he feels like he's, made the case, which is absolutely not true, but that he's made the case for launching attacks against Iran as soon as this weekend. And I think in his view, even though most of the headlines on it are, he's really made no case for it or prepared people in no way at all, except that they generally know we do have tensions with Iran from time to time. So I guess that's all we're ever going to hear about it. But no case really being made internationally or domestically why this has to happen or why this should be the timing of it. But Trump says, I told you on Thursday. So, Saturday's a fine day for it. But I think he's also supposed to be in town for, I believe, is this the weekend that the National Governors Association's gatherings were happening in there? I thought that they happened a while ago because I guess the controversy swirling around them made the news a couple of days or weeks ago, in which Trump, I guess, initially moved to exclude Democratic governors from some or all of any of the official events for the gathering that were taking place under White House auspices. Just outright, I'm just not going to have Democratic governors there. And it took a while to spur the Republican leadership of the National Governors Association to action, saying, actually, this is the National Governors Association. I really do have to say something here. And I think they moved to cancel events, I guess, where Democrats might not be included if they were supposed to be. And I don't know. I think that twisted some arms. I don't remember exactly what happened. It was kind of in the grand scheme of things, a minor story, except only because the grand scheme of things is massive, rampant corruption. Ordinarily, it would be, an impeachable offense to make it so plain to everyone that you governed for one party only that you couldn't possibly, have the greater interests of the United States as a whole in mind. Anyway, he couldn't possibly have anything in mind because that's kind of where he is. Although, yesterday evening, I read a story which I'm going to guess I probably did in fact put away somewhere, right? No? Yes? I don't know. Or at least I made note of it on social media so I can scroll back and look at my own feed for it. But there was an argument to be made based on something that he had done and said that perhaps he wasn't merely a mush-brained idiot all the way through all the time. I guess there were some moments when the old Trump, who's a grifter, first class, would shine through. And golly, it's a big one, although it hasn't really gotten a great deal of attention yet. I think it just hasn't moved fast enough. But there's this flash of brilliance in the grifter category where you say either somebody else has, taken the reins and is doing some brilliant grifting. And it really is. I mean, it's evil genius, but you recognize the almost, reluctantly labeled as genius, but you recognize this part of it. Just because it's so creative in the ways, he does find enormously creative ways to steal money. I find it kind of fascinating. In the old days, he and Jeffrey Epstein, for instance, applied this sort of genius to ways to put themselves in contact with young and sometimes naked girls. Like there's an evil genius, I think, to realizing that if you like to see naked underage girls, and that's like illegal in this country, and thankfully most of what Trump would have labeled non-S-hole countries before have laws like this. But he realized and blurted it out, of course, because he loves saying the quiet part out loud, if there is a quiet part with him, that his way around that was he would buy teen beauty pageants. And then as the owner would say, I need to inspect operations, not like show me the spreadsheets, let me see how we're operating, where's the bottom line, did we make the reservation for that fantastic hotel which I own to host the thing, do we have enough, I don't know what, muffins for breakfast. I got no idea what goes into running one of these things, but rather I need to see whether or not the place that we've given the girls to change is in fact having girls change in it. Is everything working okay? Are they able to take off their clothes and put on other clothes without having the roof collapse? I don't know what you inspect. So that was his excuse. I'm going to inspect things, make sure everything's going on. I'm the owner. I'm entitled to do this. And he was quite proud of himself for inventing a way that, mind you, currently in the United States and the political wave that Trump exploited and rode to the presidency twice, is currently busy monitoring the entrance and exits to these spaces to make sure that no one does what he's doing or what he did do. And I guess their differentiation now is, well, some of the people who are sneaking into the girls' private spaces are doing so in dresses and saying that they're girls. Whereas Donald Trump did it in a suit and never said that he was a girl, so it's okay, I guess. And anyway, I guess if you're used to coming up with schemes like that, I guess it's the kind of thing that makes people say, well, no, it's still wrong. You got to stop it. But yet I see kind of like in the abstract what the point is here. I guess you would have backstage passes. And although we hope you wouldn't be doing this just to burst in on young girls changing, but he was. And he said so quite openly. We have reason to understand that, okay, I guess kind of sort of this works. Like legally, you could piece this thing together, even if you wanted to say, actually, you're not supposed to be doing this. That sort of thing. All right. I don't know whether it's a terrible analogy, generally speaking, but it's just a terrible thing to be talking about at all. So here's the latest thing that I guess the comparison here is I would never have thought of this, and look, I would never have thought to buy a pageant so that I could sneak in and look at people changing either. I suppose I could contemplate, I could understand, all right, I'm just an old man who likes looking at, young teenage models. I'll buy a pageant and then I'll get to look at them and meet them all the time. And that's creepy enough for me. But creepy enough for me, right? But I understand the creepiness of it, but I also understand all right, this is the straightforward approach to being creepy. But buying it, and I probably, minus Donald Trump's story, would never have thought. Also, though, this entitles me to go into the changing room, because it doesn't. I would have said, well, one thing I can't do is sneak into the changing room and peek at them while they're changing. That's definitely still off limits. But still, owning the pageant means I get to meet all of the contestants, and maybe they'll go out with me because I'm so charming, or whatever the hell was going through other people's heads. He's thinking, well, I can actually peep in on them, or maybe even put cameras back there. I think maybe he did. I don't know whether he had that idea back then, but certainly shortly thereafter, he was operating in that mode with Pervolago and the bikini changing rooms. But that's another story for another day. Anyway, the story for today is another one that I have to marvel at. Where did you come up with this idea? So, I saw a Blue Sky post from, Timothy Burke. Let's take a look at Timothy Burke. He's Bubba Prog, I guess progressive, BubbaProg.xyz on Blue Sky. You know how those suffixes go. I'm not certain what we call those things. But all right. Anyway, plenty of followers too. What does he have to say? A journalist, consultant, neighborhood trustee. A voting rights advocate, non-profit theater board member, if you want to know about that, citrus grower, beagle foster dad, all those good things. Wife guy, I don't really even know what that's supposed to mean, but that's supposed to signal something. Anyway, Timothy Burke got wind of this story where is this from? WESH, an NBC News affiliate in, I don't know, Florida, I'm going to guess, because they were, this is a story about Florida. And in fact, it's written by the News Service of Florida and then repurposed by NBC News 2 down in Florida. So, do I read you the comment he made first or read you the story? The comment sums it up. So we could do long story short, but it's so much more fun to read the story and then piece it together. But anyway, credit to I already lost it. Timothy for spotting this one. State House votes to rename Florida Airport to Donald J. Trump International. And this is a storyline we've stumbled upon before. We recently heard that he wanted very badly to rename. Well, he's been after Dulles International Airport that he thinks should be renamed for him, even though he never uses it or flies in and out of it. And I think at the time, also he was saying he wanted Penn Station in New York named after him for no particular reason either. But at least he's got a footprint in New York. He's got a footprint near Dulles. I mean, his golf club isn't far from Dulles, but it doesn't have anything to do with Dulles. I don't think he has anything to do with Penn Station. I don't know when the last time he took a train anywhere was. Anyway, but he was holding some major infrastructure project in New York City, New York, New Jersey area hostage unless everybody agreed to name Penn Station after him. Weird, etc. And I think at the time I commented, I don't understand why he's so interested in having Dulles named after him, except that it's in Washington area. It's considered to be a Washington, D.C. airport. And the other one that's already there has already been renamed for Ronald Reagan. And although I wouldn't put it past him to say, I'm just going to rename it for me, screw Ronald Reagan, and everybody will go along with it, it'll be fine. I guess he figured, why bother? I'll name the other one. And I thought, you have nothing to do with this airport. Why not rename Palm Beach Airport, West Palm Beach Airport, where you fly to every weekend? Name that Donald Trump International Airport. So he said, yeah, okay, good idea. I'm going to do that. So, all right, first part of the story is the machinations that he goes through to get this to happen. So Florida lawmakers, it says, on Tuesday, moved closer to placing President Donald Trump's name on the Palm Beach International Airport despite turbulence over state funding, trademarking rights, and his personal conduct. All right, so foreshadowing. State funding. All right, well, are we going to use state funding to pay for it? The name change and all the associated costs. Is that fair? His personal conduct. He's disgusting and a rapist and a child molester. Should we be naming airports after him? Things like that. And you can skip over the other part because I don't know what that means. Well, the Republican-controlled House down in Florida voted 81-30 in support of the name change to President Donald J. Trump International Airport, as a similar measure moved to the Senate floor after clearing the Rules Committee. But they're two different bills, so they're going to have to settle on one or the other at some point. This is the president's hometown, and someone says. He lives 5 miles away from the airport, said bill co-sponsor Representative Meg Weinberger, a Republican of Palm Beach Gardens. St. Augustine Republican Kim Kendall, a former air traffic controller, if that matters, who also co-sponsored the bill, said Trump deserves the recognition for airport infrastructure investments his administration has made in the past year to modernize facilities. And I suppose that might even be true that they've made those investments, but I'm sure that he was like, well, in order to make it more convenient for me to fly my gigantic airplane in and out of there at a moment's notice, we need to make the following improvements. So let's do that. And Stewart Republican Representative John Snyder said, with the renaming of this bill, not really, you mean the bill that renames the airport, after we all vote yes, which they didn't, it will officially become a great airport. That's kind of funny. Democrats, though, said renaming should wait until Trump is out of office, as they raised issues with his past conduct, which includes 2 House impeachments and 34 felony convictions in New York for falsifying business records. Yeah, among other things. The legacy that I've seen so far has left me wanting, said Representative Ashley Gant, Democrat of Miami. I'm going to put that differently. House Minority Leader Fentress Driscoll of Tampa, Minority Leader, that's a Democrat, pointed to DTTM Operations LLC. Now we're getting to the bottom of this. It's a Delaware-based entity managed by the Trump Organization. And last week, this is what our sharp-eyed Timothy Burke spotted here. Last week, they've made a filing with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office for the intent to use the names President Donald J. Trump International Airport, Donald J. Trump International Airport, and DJT. It feels like the grift is happening, Driscoll said. Yeah, wait a second. What do you mean to do with this? The trademarks, it says, could require DTTM operations to be included in the financing of licensing deals. By the way, DTTM, filed a trademark claim. Is that DTTM, Donald Trump Trademark? Donald Trump Trademark Operations, LLC? Very likely. This is what we're getting at, and this is what Timothy spotted. Last week, Trump registers the trademark Donald J. Trump International Airport, knowing that Florida is about to try to do this, and he's going to try it elsewhere. He doesn't say Donald J. Trump West Palm Beach International Airport. Could be for any one of them. In fact, let's make it for multiple. The more, the better. And if he owns the trademark, I think the theory goes, Florida Republicans would vote to rename the Palm Beach International Airport Donald J. Trump International Airport, putting taxpayers on the hook for licensing fees that go straight to him. Not only would he be honored by seeing Florida rename its airport for him, but they would have to pay him for the rights to do it and to use the name because he trademarked it ahead of time, knowing somebody was going to do this. He did it with the idea that he would steal that money out the back. So not only do they have to change all the signs and repaint everything and millions of dollars coming out of the taxpayer till to do this, but you also have the state, if they want to, if they would really, really want to rename the airport, well, that's going to cause me all sorts of inconvenience using my name. People could confuse me and you. I had to trademark the phrase Donald J. Trump International Airport for reasons. And now you have to pay me $10 million a year, whatever he settles on, to use the name. Where are my Republicans against waste, fraud, and abuse? Why aren't they saying, holy cow, no, we can't have this. This is it's a flat no. We can't be wasting this time and this money. Oh, wait, we can? Oh, all right. Well, then I guess we will. There's more to the story, but I think it's just more quotes about people realizing how crazy this is. Where are we? Weinberger. Who's Weinberger? Which one is that? Let me scroll back. I don't know. Was this a Weinberger, a pro or a con person here? Why don't I see this anywhere? All right. Well, Weinberger asserted that there was no collaboration between lawmakers and Trump's company on the name change, and the family has agreed, quote, to completely waive the trademark for the Trump name to Palm Beach International. Now, that may or may not be true. Not, I'm sure. But, what he trademarked was Donald J. Trump International Airport. So I'm sure he could say, well, I'll waive it for Palm Beach, but I'm not going to waive it for Dulles, and I am going to force Dulles to do it. Wouldn't that be confusing if there were two Donald J. Trump International Airports? No. In fact, all airports should be named that, and they should all pay me. I guess that may or may not be what he's aiming at. I have no idea where he thinks he's going with this. Oh, Weinberger is Meg Weinberger from Palm Beach Gardens, who said earlier, this is the president's hometown. He lives 5 miles away. So how do you like that? She's convinced that they've said, oh, don't worry about it. We'll waive all the fees, which totally explains why they ran to the Patent and Trademark Office last week to trademark it, right? Because you're going to waive all the fees. I have my doubts. Trump and paperwork, man. Although maybe it's possible he didn't trademark it. Someone should check that. And check everything because, they have a habit of forging things. In fact, I have another story waiting in the wings about yet another instance of forgery in this government. But, it has to wait under a pile of other things which are even more disgusting, believe it or not, than routine forging of official paperwork. But we don't know whether he really filed this patent or trademark office thing. The story says it. I have no reason to doubt them. I just have reason to doubt Donald Trump and that he's executed everything correctly. You should bring me the paperwork and I'll inspect it. Now, we all have to inspect everything now. Is this ink? Did he write this? Do we know that? Was he awake that morning? Are we sure he wasn't under the influence of mind-altering drugs? Any question you can ask. It's just not an important enough a question to ask it about. Although now it has become important enough a question to ask about because he's going to rake in untold, I don't know what, millions, I guess, from the state of Florida for the honor of naming this. Wow. Democrats, to go on with the story, unsuccessfully sought several changes to the bill. There's some creative thinking going on here, including a proposal to include Trump's name with former President John F. Kennedy on the airport. What does Kennedy have to do with this airport? Nothing. They just thought it would be a funny jab over the Kennedy Center, I guess. Similar, as it says, to Trump putting his own name on the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts in Washington, D.C. Everything that's going to be Trump has to be Trump Kennedy, though. I guess. Anyway, that didn't go anywhere. Meanwhile, the Republican-controlled Senate Rules Committee voted a short time earlier, along party lines, of course, to support the name change. The Senate proposal comes as the chamber's budget bill, released on Friday, included $2.75 million to cover the cost of changing the signs and other items across West Palm Beach's complex that annually handles around 8.6 million passengers. So there's all sorts of repainting and new signage that would be necessary. So they're saying almost $3 million just for that alone. Senator Chevron Jones, a Democrat of Miami Gardens, said the trademarking, though, raises ethical concerns. Yes, it does. He's quite... she, I'm not certain. Quite correct about that. Setting a precedent in which the sitting president could financially benefit off his name on a public facility. That would be new. This is about generating revenue from a public entity or a private company, a company with Donald Trump's interest at the helm and not the people of the state of Florida, said Jones. Jones emotionally argued against the name change for an individual who, he said, there's your answer, considers people who are black like himself, as you know, as monkeys, after posting a video online that included a clip depicting former President Barack Obama and his wife Michelle as apes. Everyone remembers that one. I don't want to hear anybody say, well, he took it down. You cannot take down racism, Jones said, in the sense that it's embodied in a video. I mean, everyone kind of hopes to take down racism, and I'm sure that he would agree. Jones had previously voted for the bill in 2 prior committee hearings, which is kind of astonishing, which were held before Trump's social media post portraying the Obamas as monkeys. That was the make or break for him. That's amazing. Melbourne Republican Senator Debbie Mayfield, who sponsored the Senate bill last Thursday, submitted the funding request and asked for $5.5 million. So her estimate of how much it will cost to change the signage is much higher, unless she's baking in an extra $2.5 million as the anticipated fee for the trademark. Mayfield, who described the video with the Obamas as unfortunate, added that you cannot disagree with the fact that he has done some remarkable things for our country. He has put our country back as America first. Included in Mayfield's funding request was $250,000 for rebranding consultants involving overhead announcements, emergency messaging, and telephone system updates. Another $250,000 for rebranding equipment, vehicles, marketing materials, and uniforms. I love the logistics. Hi, everyone. It's me, Commercial Guy. This time here to remind you that there are a number of ways you can support the show even without spending a dime. Except for the dime that you spent on internet access so you could hear the show. Ignore that one. Anyway, I'm talking about feeding the evil algorithms that make the modern internet tick. When those YouTubers and TikTokers plead with you to smash that like button or subscribe so you never miss an episode, or even just leave a comment, it's because they know that it makes the algorithms more likely to recommend their content to other users. And they must know what they're talking about because their shows have millions of subscribers. And mostly those shows are terrible. We rule. So go find us on YouTube, find us on Libsyn, Stitcher, or Patreon, or Spotify, TuneIn, Apple, Amazon, Pandora, and then like us, love us, post a comment, ring the bell, punch the clown, shock the monkey, whatever you're supposed to do on that platform to make that algorithm think we're cool. Thanks so much for helping us blindly walk into Skynet's oblivion, but maybe with a little extra coin in our pockets. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I'm lucky that I was sharp-eyed in all this. I left my phone and all of the alarms that alert me to all of the breaks back at the breakfast table, some 15 plus feet behind me, let's say. And but I hadn't turned any of them on. So, and of course, I have it silent but on vibrate so that I will catch my attention without making too much noise on the air. Except if you don't turn any of them on, it makes no noise. And we've done it before. Talked straight through the break and said, "Wait, whatever happened to that break?" But I don't know. The instincts kicked in, and I looked at the clock and just did it manually. Seems to have worked. One thing has worked today. That's good news. Anyway, yeah, this is an awful long time to spend on this local news story about this renaming grift. But I am struck by the weird genius of it. Like, that really takes some thinking. I understand I don't agree with and wouldn't do what he does just about the renaming. Like, that's just too much vanity for me, but not for him, of course. He wants lots of things named after him. I understand that. I don't agree with it. I understand it. But yeah, it would really take me some thinking. You'd have to sit down and intentionally say, well, how can I make money from this? Which is, of course, that's how he lives and breathes. How do I make money from this? I just took a breath, my first conscious breath of the morning. How can I monetize that? I don't know. I don't think he's come up with a way to do that either. But wow, to monetize the supposed honor of forcing people to rename things after you and then finding a way to monetize it. And it must, I don't know. I'm curious about where they got the idea that he said that they were going to waive this fee, because there's just literally no reason to trademark that phrase unless you were intent on generating fees. The fee to file for it is minimal compared to what he's doing in the business world in any given day and how much he's stealing left or right. But you don't want, why pay it at all? Remember, I think there was one point when we got a hold of one of his tax forms from way back when, 100 years ago, that he was deducting the fees for one of his son's dues for Cub Scouts or something on his taxes. Like, this is a guy who doesn't part with a dime unless there's a plan for turning it into a dollar. Doesn't always work. We spent time yesterday reading the list of failed businesses. And this could, I guess, just be a different failed business. DTTM Operations LLC may go bankrupt because he's been caught here. But I don't know why being caught would stop him in any of this. More than likely what he's doing is what he did yesterday. I don't remember what prompted him, but he was at some stop somewhere. Maybe this might have been the Rome, Georgia visit, during which he let everybody know that he thought, I'm being such a schmuck. I'm donating my salary. I don't even need it. I don't take money from this country. I don't need the salary. I do it because I love America. I'm stealing $10 billion from every other source under the sun. I certainly don't need the $400,000 in presidential salary, but he loves to brag about it, and he loves to brag about it so much, and paperwork being what it is with him. I would say don't be surprised you should be surprised if we one day learn. You should be surprised if we one day learn he didn't donate any of that salary. It was just something he said in order to make people think he donated his salary and walk around saying what a great guy he is. Not that would do it for me, but I say don't be surprised when we find that out, because of course we're going to find that out. I guess all we need to be surprised about is that he bothered to continue saying that he did this thing. But I'm sure the paperwork has been screwed up. And there have been attempts, I think, in the past to show, I think, like a canceled check of some kind when somebody called him on it. And all right, well, I'll show you the canceled check of me donating my salary to something. Except, we started the show saying he keeps getting caught forging things. So what do I know? Did he really do it? Did he really not do it? Probably won't surprise anybody to find out that eventually we'll learn. I guess the reason you should be surprised if you do learn about it is that would mean we eventually get down to the level of scandal where we have the capacity to investigate his having lied about donating a salary to which legally he would be entitled. So that's not really that huge of a problem. And what are you going to do about it if you find out he's really actually not donating? You're going to tut and point your finger and say, another example of him being a liar. Where does that get you? I don't know. So I'd be surprised if we ever bother to research it, I guess. Among the many things we're going to need to research in the future. Anyway, back to the logistics, because I loved getting the details, and it's a funny story all by itself. And Timothy Burke told it just fine in a paragraph, but the details always just make it much more interesting to me. Like we were going through the funding requests. So now we got the Senate bill asking for $5.5 million to fix whatever needs fixing when they do the renaming. All right. If you left it at that and said, how much does it cost to redo all the signage and branding and everything at a, mid-level airport? What did they say? 8.5 million passengers annually. I don't know how that compares to others. It's not gigantic. It's not a hub. It's an out-of-the-way airport, but it's an international airport, jets and all that, right? $5.5 million. Okay, I mean, I guess I'd buy that. If you were asking me to sign on the dotted line and authorize the money, I'd say, well, let me see some more detail. So they gave it. Well, we have to have $5.5 million because, after all, it'll cost $250,000 just to rebrand the equipment and vehicles and marketing materials and uniforms. Like, wow, thinking about it, like, okay, well, what am I going to do here? When I drive into the airport, right away I see there's a sign out by the road that says Palm Beach International Airport. Now, that has to be changed. I don't think that's a $250,000 job, but it's something. It's, after all, I don't know what, a pile of concrete and bricks with metal lettering, each individual one handcrafted, blah, blah, blah. Now you got to tear that down and put up a whole new one. Highway signage? Okay, yeah. I guess we got to do all of that, but maybe they make the state pay for that. Anyway, state highway funds as opposed to this bill. Inside the airport, of course, right. Okay, well, equipment, right. The Zamboni, for instance. I don't know why they have a Zamboni. It doesn't make any sense in Florida. Probably don't have that, but all the little pieces of equipment, the baggage cars, if they say Palm Beach International Airport, now they have to say Donald J. Trump International Airport. The gas pumps that fill up the tractors that pull the luggage carts. I don't know. All sorts of things like that. Promotional materials. There'll be flyers, etc. Uniforms. The uniforms of the guys waving the light sticks to tell the plane to crash into this place or crash into that place. They now all have to say Donald J. Trump International Airport on them. All those sorts of things. Embossed toilet paper, for all I know. So, okay. It's starting to stack up, but still, that's $250,000. We got a long way to go to get to $5.5 million. But then I note here another $250,000 for rebranding consultants. That's interesting. Involving overhead announcements, emergency messaging, and telephone system updates. I don't know why that's sort of broken out from all the rest of the stuff. Hello, you have reached Palm Beach International Airport. No, you haven't. JK. April Fools, it's Donald J. Trump International Airport. Please leave a message for an airline after the I don't know, whatever. There's a phone system. You got to re-record that. And then, of course, the overhead messages, right? Like, Donald J. Trump, please report to the white courtesy phone at Donald J. Trump International Airport. I don't know if they really, but there's usually like Palm Beach International Airport welcomes you to Florida. Please pick up your complimentary gun at any kiosk at the TSA station so you can bring it on board with you. Whatever it is that they do. Well, now that has to be a message sponsored by the Donald J. Trump International Airport or President Donald J. Trump International Airport, trademark. Right? Maybe we have to pay now. I don't know, for talking about it. All right, so the expenses are stacking up, but I think that's sort of the end of the detail on it. So Mayfield's request says $250,000 for consultants for doing this stuff, but only part of doing this stuff. I imagine that if there's $250,000 for rebranding consultants involving overhead announcements, emergency messaging, and telephone system updates, then another $250,000 for rebranding equipment, vehicles, marketing materials, and uniforms. What about how much for consultants involving rebranding equipment, vehicles, marketing materials, and uniforms? Or is that done in-house? I'm not sure. I would think that there would probably be a consulting fee for that. And it might even be Mayfield Consulting that handles that stuff. Or DTTMRC, Donald Trump Trademark Rebranding Consulting Operations, LLC, might want to get $250,000 for this work. But there you go. There's all sorts of things that need to be done, but then after that, that's it. The airport will need resources to complete the renaming, Mayfield's funding proposal states, in addition to signage, branding elements, and website updates. Oh, forgot the website. And the apps. The airport will also make technology updates required, I assume they meant, including overhead and emergency messaging systems, but that was covered in the first part with that's the consulting, $250,000 for consulting on it, but also then you got to spend money on the actual doing of what was consulted about. the emergency messaging systems, and passenger processing systems to ensure full and consistent implementation of the new airport name. The legislative proposal would give authority to the state to name the 7 major commercial service airports in Florida, with the only change proposed being Palm Beach International Airport becoming Donald J. Trump International Airport. But it doesn't say president. But he owns both trademarks. The name change is subject to approval by the Federal Aviation Administration. Well, that would be a problem, except for the fact that Trump owns that, too. And the execution of an agreement between Palm Beach County and the trademark holder authorizing the commercial use of the name Donald J. Trump International Airport. That's an extra step. That's not usually part of the airport naming process. I would venture to say it's fairly rare that the name of the airport is trademarked by a third party and licensed to the state. I would venture to say if they wanted to name it Palm Beach International Airport because it's in Palm Beach, and some enterprising trademark squatter, before they did it, ran to the trademark office and trademarked the name Palm Beach International Airport, and then demanded payment if they wanted to call it Palm Beach International Airport, they would probably say, unless it was one of the state legislators, they would probably say, fine, we're going to name this the airport or the International Airport at Palm Beach so as not to pay you. Right? They would do that, but not for one of them or for Donald Trump. That they'll pay. The bill also preempts to the legislature the naming of airports to Orlando International Airport. This is very oddly phrased, but I guess it's what they say. So this bill says there are 7 airports that the state reserves the right to rename. The only one we're renaming right now is the Trump one, but it does also say, let's see, the bill preempts to the legislature. I think that probably means they're reserving the right to the legislature to name airports in Orlando, Miami, Fort Lauderdale / Hollywood. That's technically the case. Tampa, Southwest Florida International Airport in Lee County, and Jacksonville International Airport. So there's licensing fees to be made on all of that. There could be an Eric Trump Airport, a Donald Trump Jr. Airport, Donald Trump Jr. Airport. I don't know. Donald Trump's granddaughter's Cybertruck International Airport. Any number of opportunities to profit from. Well, 7 opportunities to profit from it in Florida alone. Okay, I felt like we had to put that one out there. There's a lot of other bigger stories, but I did hint at there being another forgery story earlier, and I'll borrow it here from Tech Dirt, which essentially found, I guess this one too could be long story shorted, but why bother doing that? This was, where do we find this one? I think I must have, here we are. Melissa Lewis. Do we know Melissa Lewis? Melissa Lewis, data reporter for the Center for Investigative Reporting, and has had bylines at Mother Jones and Reveal News, was reading the comment of Stephen Lewandowski, I hope no relation to Corey, professor of cognitive science at the University of Bristol. So cognitive, I'm guessing, probably not much to do with Corey Lewandowski. That's good news. Spelled slightly differently anyway. And, well, long story short, we'll try it this way this time. Ever wondered how your grant got canceled here in the United States? Is what we mean. Now we know. It's a dodgy story. Some college dropout asked ChatGPT, "Is it DEI/woke?" That's it. And there's a screen grab from the Tech Dirt story, but Melissa Lewis gets to my favorite part of this, in which she grabs the quote from page 37 of the complaint to the courts that sparked the Tech Dirt article. And I don't know whether it appears in the Tech Dirt article or not. It might just be in the complaint. That's where the citation is to. Melissa Lewis is the kind of person who would dig through the complaint itself as an investigative reporter to flag grants for their DEI involvement. Fox, and I think we're talking about the person, not the network, by the name of Fox, perhaps working in the DOGE organization in those early days. Fox entered the following command into ChatGPT. They didn't, I guess, have a directive to work with Grok then, which is amazing, but I guess it was still early days for Grok, and Elon didn't think to require it. But you put into ChatGPT, this is the quote, "Does the following relate at all to DEI? Respond factually." That's nice. Factually, in less than 120 characters. Begin with yes or no, followed by a brief explanation. I think that's a good, it's a concise request. It's not a good request. It's a dumb request. It's very, very, very likely to get stupid, and incorrect slop answers, but they didn't believe in slop at the time. It's infallible. It's a computer. We programmed it. It's my request. How could it be wrong? Answer yes or no, followed by a brief explanation. So again, because this is part of the point too. Does the following relate at all to DEI? Respond factually in less than 120 characters. Begin with yes or no, followed by a brief explanation. Folks, you've just read 299 characters. The 120 is the limit. So all of that information, does the following relate at all to DEI? Say yes or no, blah, blah, exceeds the 120 that they're allowing the computer to give you. So it's a yes or no with virtually no explanation. And then that's it. Then your program is canceled, which I think we suspected was the case in the day at the time when we were hearing about DOGE and the way they did their work, right? So, all right, let me open up the Tech Dirt article and have a look here. Is it brand new? Yeah, basically. From yesterday, Mike Masnick writing for Tech Dirt. DOGE Bros grant review process was literally just asking ChatGPT, is this DEI? Like, this is the meme, with the butterfly. Is this DEI? I guess, except it's the opposite of the intention of the meme. But okay, he's not discovering something he wants to see. He's discovering something he doesn't. So that's odd. But anyway, federal grants that have been approved after a full application and review process. And remember, this is all designed to keep the grant process on the up and up, keep it out of the hands of grifters, make sure that there's several layers of review for scientific merit. Sometimes it sucks and you end up getting screwed out of something you really could have won if it was different personnel or people looked at things differently. But it's a competitive process meant to do what? To eliminate the arbitrary and capricious elements from either approving or dismissing grant applications. And they just bypassed the whole thing with 120 characters from ChatGPT. Federal grants that have been approved after a full application and review process with science and everything were terminated by some random inexperienced DOGE bro based on whether ChatGPT could explain in 120 characters or less that they were related to DEI. That's what the newly released proposed amended complaint from the Authors Guild against the U.S. government reveals about how DOGE actually decided which National Endowment for the Humanities grants to kill. In case you were wondering, how did the Authors Guild get into this? These are grants for humanities, not sciences. But they did I'm sure they did the same thing for the sciences. So, although that we have to scrap the first part of this discussion, but still, the aim is the same, to take and this is even harder to do, to take the arbitrary and capriciousness out of and prevent it from entering into the grant-making process in the humanities. That's even more difficult. But the whole point is that there's all sorts of review and accountability and the boards, and how do you get on the board, and you have to have the credentials, and you have to be approved, and maybe not Senate approved, but work through various layers to even get on the board, to have one vote, and then certain voting procedures. It's meant to do their best to put sunshine on the process. So they immediately ChatGPT it to death. There were plenty of early reports that the DOGE bros Elon Musk brought into government, operating on the hubristically ignorant belief that they understood how things worked better than actual government employees, were using AI tools to figure out what to cut. Now we have the receipts. The bros in question here are Nate Kavanaugh and Justin Fox, that's Fox, who appeared all over the place in the early DOGE days, destroying the U.S. government. The link here is to an NPR story, DOGE federal agency what's the story headline here? I'm using the URL. That's not it. DOGE has tried to embed beyond the executive branch. Some targets have pushed back. A May 2025 story. Okay. Returning now to Tech Dirt. The quote here is Kavanaugh, that's Nate Kavanaugh, was appointed president of the U.S. Institute of Peace. Remember? Now you're starting. Oh, yeah, that guy. Okay. After DOGE took over, though that position is affected by this week's, and this would be May, court ruling. And you remember how that went, I hope. Shortly after being named the, what kind of director? Yes, acting director of the Interagency Council on Homelessness, another one of these guys with 19 jobs, one of the agencies that Trump's budget proposal calls for eliminating, Kavanaugh placed its entire staff on administrative leave. Kavanaugh first emerged at GSA in February, General Services Administration, where he met with many technical staffers and software engineers and interviewed them about their jobs, according to 4 GSA employees who spoke on condition of anonymity because they feared retaliation. I'm sure they got it, too, even though they were anonymous. They probably got it without being discovered, but they got cut because they were previous government employees, and we hate all of them. All right. So he did the, what would you say you do here interview. Since then, this is Kavanaugh, been detailed to multiple other agencies, according to court filings, including the U.S. African Development Foundation, the Inter-American Foundation, the Institute of Museum and Library Services, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and the Minority Business Development Agency. He sounds like a probably sympathetic minority ear, right? Kavanaugh's partner in much of the small agency outreach is Justin Fox, who most recently worked as an associate at Nexus Capital Management, according to his LinkedIn profile. Now back to the story. As far as I can tell, Kavanaugh is a college dropout who founded a startup to do IP licensing management. Oh, he may have arranged the airport deal for Trump. That has gone through some trouble, so he's not actually making any money with it. We've mentioned Kavanaugh here before, as it turns out, in Tech Dirt, for the time when he was head of the U.S. Institute of Peace, and Elon and DOGE falsely labeled a guy who had worked for U.S. IP as a member of the Taliban, causing the actual Taliban to kidnap the guy's family. Oh, I think I missed that story. Wow. Thanks a lot. Gosh. Right? So we'll never get to investigating whether or not he donated his salary. Right? We have to do this first. Fox, as noted, was a low-rung employee at some random private equity firm. Neither should have any of the jobs listed above, and they don't seem to know, well, we'll say squat, about anything relevant to a government role. Anyway, as the Authors Guild figured out in Discovery, when these two inexperienced and ignorant DOGE bros were assigned to cut grants in the National Endowment for the Humanities, apparently Fox just started feeding grant titles to ChatGPT, asking, in effect, is this DEI? From the complaint, and then we read this part. To flag grants for their DEI involvement, Fox entered the following command into ChatGPT, quote, does the following relate at all to DEI? Respond factually in less than 120 characters. Begin with yes or no, followed by a brief explanation. Do not use this initiative or this description in your response. Okay. He then inserted short descriptions of each grant. Fox did nothing to understand ChatGPT's interpretation of DEI as used in the command, or to ensure that ChatGPT's interpretation of DEI matched his own. An important point in all of this, and maybe possibly overlooked in all of the outrage. But yeah, you're asking ChatGPT, is this DEI? Does ChatGPT have any idea what DEI is? Maybe it could go around looking and finding out about it. I guess. I'm sure that's the task, but who knows what it's reading to learn. And I mean, just from an effective governance standpoint, if you think this is effective governance, like, don't you want to be sure that it's getting your definition, the evil definition of DEI? I don't know. They didn't even do that work. So back to the article. Cool. Sounds like a good method, right? Cool. Then actual staff at the NEH, National Endowment for the Humanities, including experts who might have been able to explain to these two interlopers what the grants actually did and why they were worth supporting, were blocked from challenging the termination of these grants. Again, I think taking this from the complaint, grants identified this way were slated for termination, with only a handful of exceptions. Staff at NEH, including the acting chair, were not permitted to remove them from the termination list. It seems to me, our author then says, that two ignorant, dodgy pros canceling humanities grants based solely on, yo, is this DEI ChatGPT prompts? Wow. Kind of shows the need for actual diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how things like the National Endowment for the Humanities should work. Instead, you have two rando dweebs who don't understand squat asking the answer machine to justify canceling grants that sound too woke. And the amazing thing even beyond that is they never even find out whether or not ChatGPT agrees with them about what DEI is or means. In other words, they didn't even make sure that it was lying the same way they were lying. It really feels like these two, well, they're enjoying their profanity in here. We'll use our censoring horn just to make fun of what's going on here, but it really feels like these two chuckle fucks should be asked to justify their jobs way more than any of these grant recipients should have been asked to justify their work. But nope, the bros just got to canceling. So see if you notice a pattern. But of course, we got to go to break. So we'll give you the start of the pattern. More quoting, I guess, from the complaint itself. For instance, Fox searched each grant's description for the use of keywords that appeared in a detection list that he created. Those keywords included terms such as LGBTQ, which does that mean, by the way, that it would miss LTGBQ or something if you put it in a different order? Homosexual, tribal, immigrants, gay, BIPOC, that is Black, Indigenous, People of Color, Native, and so on. Terms like white, Caucasian, and heterosexual did not appear on the detection list. What if it says, we hate all those things? Oh, well, you just miss them, I guess. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. A little bit late in getting back to the keyboard, but we were in the middle of the question of, can you spot the pattern here, right? Fox searched each grant's description for the use of certain stupid keywords, but basically culture war trigger words. And if any of them came up, or any, I guess, other sort of iteration of anything close to that came up, they probably didn't do too much review. All right, this is my list. Get rid of them. Fox also organized certain grants into a spreadsheet. That's more organization than I credit him with lists that he labeled, quote, craziest grants, and another spreadsheet page, other bad grants. So that's the end of the creativity, I guess. Among those grants on those lists were those Fox described as relating to, quote, experiences of LGBTQ military service. One titled, I guess, Oral Histories of Latinx in the Midwest, and everybody dislikes the Latinx thing anyway, but that's no excuse. And Social and Cultural Context of Tribal Linguistics, and a book on the first gay black science fiction writer in history. Can't have any of that, I guess. Fox also used the artificial intelligence tool ChatGPT, again, we're quoting from the complaint, to search grant descriptions that purportedly related to DEI, but Fox did not direct the AI tool that it should not identify grants solely on the basis of race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, or similar characteristic, which would be one of the arbitrary and capricious measures you're looking to avoid in all of this. I would add. The AI searches broadly captured all grants that referenced to individuals based on precisely those characteristics, which would be a prohibited thing, you see. For example, the AI searches flagged a grant described as concerning the Colfax massacre, the single greatest incidence of anti-black violence during Reconstruction, and flagged another concerning the untold story of Jewish women's slave labor during the Holocaust. Another that funded a film examining how the game of baseball was instrumental in healing wounds caused by World War I and the 1980s economic standoff between the U.S. and Japan. Another, I don't like the way this list is constructed, but another charting the rise and reforms of the Native Americans' boarding school systems in the U.S. between 1819 and 1934, and another about the Women Air Force Service Pilots, or WASP, unfortunately named it that, the first female pilots to fly for the U.S. military during World War II, and the black female pilots who were denied entry into the WASP Corps because of their race. So, yeah, this kid basically fed any grant that might upset a white Christian nationalist into ChatGPT, saying, justify me canceling this stuff for being woke. And then he and his college dropout IP licensing buddy canceled them all. But wait till you find out about how they canceled them all, because we got to get to it yet. Kavanaugh worked closely with Fox in selecting which grants to terminate using this selection criteria. Fox and Kavanaugh sorted the grants in lists labeled to cancel or to keep. No grant relating to DEI as broadly conceived of by Fox and Kavanaugh appeared on the to keep list, in case you're wondering. Grants that Fox and Kavanaugh considered wasteful and thus slated for termination could be moved to the to keep list by defendant McDonald. I don't know who that is offhand. I didn't know that Ronald McDonald was the acting commissioner of the National Endowment for Humanities or whatever. But anyway, defendant McDonald could have one of these things moved to a to keep list only if they related somehow to America 250 or the Garden of Heroes initiatives based on the views of defendants McDonald, Fox, Kavanaugh, and NEH staff members. Staff member Adam Wolfson, a particular staff member. So those were the people who were empowered to give grants a reprieve and moving them from the to cancel list to this to not cancel list, to keep list, if they could somehow come up with a connection, despite the fact that it was riddled with disgusting wokeness and DEI, if they could somehow relate it to something Trump cared about, the America 250 or Garden of Heroes thing, then they could save it. It might be woke, but it's in the Garden of Heroes, so look out. I guess that's okay. The complaint notes that almost immediately Kavanaugh and Fox sent out mass emails to more than 1,400 grant recipients. From where? From a private non-government email server, which would make me think it was a hoax and spam. But it told them, of course, their grants had been terminated. A non-governmental private server. Hey, your government thing is canceled. Really? Even though the emails stated that the grant terminations were signed by the acting director of NEH, Michael McDonald. That's the McDonald we're talking about. That's the defendant, the named defendant in this lawsuit. He admitted that, or I'm sure he wanted everybody to know it. It says he admitted, and it is something of an admission, but if you're trying to get out of a lawsuit, it's not that brave of an admission. He admitted that he had nothing to do with them. It was Fox, all Fox, Kavanaugh, and ChatGPT, based on a very stupid prompt. Now, one more quote, I think, from the complaint, which might help clarify that and get us to the summaries of the story that we read first. McDonald appeared to acknowledge that he did not determine which grants to terminate, nor did he draft the termination letters. First, he stated that he had explained NEH's traditional termination process, but that as they said in the notification letter, they would not be adhering to traditional notification processes. So they said they were going to violate protocol right in the letter. So isn't that okay? Isn't that enough? And they, quote, did not feel those should be applied in this instance. Further, in response to a question about the rationale for grant terminations, he replied that the rationale was simply because that's the way DOGE had operated at other agencies for the long tradition of 5 days. They operated this way at other agencies, and they applied the same methodology here. McDonald also said that any statement about the number of grants terminated would be conjecture on his part, even though he purportedly signed each termination letter. Dodgy bros gone wild, to return to the story. But by the way, I don't know whether it's covered in the next 3 paragraphs or not. But if not, we'll go back to the original comment to tell you where the pleadings went after this. So, dodgy bros gone wild. So just to recap, we have 2 random dodgy bros with basically no knowledge or experience in the humanities, and at least one of whom is a college dropout, who just went around terminating grants that had gone through a full grant application process by feeding in a list of culture war grievance terms, selecting out the grant titles based on the appearance of seemingly woke words, then asking ChatGPT, yo, tell me, is this DEI? And then sending termination emails the next day from a private server and forging the director's signature. That's the key part. Oh, yes, forging. I told you that this story was going to come around to that. Trump and paperwork, man. I am telling you, always question it. If it wasn't enough that your termination notice was coming from a non-government private server claiming that your grant was terminated, you might say, well, I don't know, show me the official letter. So they attach the official letter, even though this is a non-governmental server. But you might ask, well, how would this non-governmental private server even get a hold of this non-public official letter to attach unless it was, in fact, just a hoax and a forgery? But would they really do something like it? Would anybody risk the prosecution that's supposed to come along with this sort of thing? And I guess the answer in Trump pardon world is, yeah, sure. Why not? Because you're not going to get prosecuted in the end. But still, this seems more hoaxy than anything else. I think my first inclination would be, mine maybe not everybody's, would be to say, this can't possibly be real. We should look into whether or not this is real. But then you'd run into, at some point, you'd run into a allegedly governmental organization telling you, no, it's real. It really is. We're just doing things in a weird way. And you'd have to sue and go through discovery and interview all sorts of people. It would be a very lengthy process until you could finally get the proof together that no, these things aren't real. They were forged. And they were intended to be forged from the beginning. It's very odd. That's all I can say. All right. Now, you might be able to hear I'm beginning to suffer from the onset of the cold. So there's occasional pauses to catch up with things and clear the throat. And we'll try not to bother you with them so much. Anyway, that's just remarkable. At the end here, this is what government efficiency looks like in practice, the quote-unquote government efficiency. 2 guys with 0 relevant experience, a keyword list built on culture war grievances, and a chatbot confidently spitting out 120-character verdicts on federal grants that went all the way through actual review processes. The experts who might have explained what these grants actually do, locked out. The director whose signature appeared on termination letters couldn't tell you which grants got cut or why. Maybe didn't even sign the letters, right? The cruelty isn't incidental, but neither is the incompetence. These are people who genuinely believe that being good at vibes-based pattern matching is the same, or better, in their view probably, as understanding how institutions work. And the wreckage they leave behind is an entirely predictable result. It's a pretty good point, well made and well documented. I hope the suit wins. We'd have to now sit and see what the Trumpy judiciary does with this thing and whether or not they're willing to credit the case that they've built, or they just dismiss it because reasons and you can't stop me. We'll see which kind of judges they draw in this case. Where is it happening? In the Southern District of New York. So I guess there's still some chance that they might actually be able to prevail there. And even in the Second Circuit as well, they might make it all the way to the Supreme Court before being told, I don't know, I think that's a fine basis for canceling grants. It's only minimally more stupid than the basis for granting the grants in the first place, would be what probably Alito types would have to say about these things. Anyway, it would be a hell of a thing if it also turned out that the guy wasn't just trying to dodge responsibility. He really was having them forge the letter. I mean, I guess it's you could try to explain it with middle ground and say, well, lots of official letters go out without the supposed signatory actually touching pen to paper in signing these grants. But there's an authorization process by which the staff are authorized to speak on behalf of this person. But usually they're supposed to stand up and say, yeah, well, the buck still stops with me. Here, though, the defendants are saying, well, actually, the buck stopped somewhere else because I really didn't know what was going on. And the whole project was designed to not know what was going on. We were literally just going to ask ChatGPT to do it. So this is a great example of why don't you just ism in action, right? But in the techno age, the tech bro age, why don't you just go in there and get rid of all the wasteful spending? Okay, but how would we do it? What would our process be? Well, now you can just say, why don't you ask ChatGPT, show me all the wasteful spending, and then just cut it. Don't double check this work, just cut it. And here's how you end up with that. Okay, the unscheduled break of the Kagro in the Morning Show is over. We have to take a couple of mid-session breaks just to make sure that all of our physical logistics here, I guess you could say, are working. Okay, let's see. I mentioned to you yesterday that there was some reason to believe that the very exciting news of the arrest of Andrew Windsor Mountbatten, or Mountbatten Windsor, whichever one it is that they're using, was somehow, though very certainly and very definitely Epstein related, was not necessarily related to that thing which you might first associate with the name Jeffrey Epstein, i.e. pedophilia, okay, and sexual misconduct. While that was all certainly alleged and apparently pretty well established with respect to the person now known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, Windsor Mountbatten, whatever the hell, that wasn't what yesterday's announcement of the arrest was about, and that it was something else, something different. I have, for your consideration on that front, an article from The Atlantic, which, this one I don't know that we necessarily have to read on the air. It might be something you want to take a look at off the air, and I think there's a gift access available to the article. That, though it's, it was distributed, I grabbed it, I read it once, now it's expired. But the story is that, here's the headline. The former Prince Andrew, that's I guess the shorter way of referring to the guy at this point, never should have forwarded those emails. What is this about? What does it mean? He faces criminal penalties for what? For allegedly leaking government secrets to Jeffrey Epstein. And I mean, I do want to say, one, a reminder that means that he's not currently charged with any sexually related misconduct per se. But the thing that they are arresting for is very definitely something you should be arrested for. He faces criminal penalties for allegedly leaking government secrets to Jeffrey Epstein. But just as important as leaking government secrets is the fact that he did leak them to Jeffrey Epstein. And you should not lose sight of the fact it wasn't just that Jeffrey Epstein was the biggest pedophile ring guy going. It wasn't just that he was linked to all of these elite personages. It wasn't just that he was amassing huge amounts of money. All those things play into one another. The reason that someone who might then have been a prince of the United Kingdom would leak confidential, or what did they say, government secrets to Jeffrey Epstein is that Jeffrey Epstein built his empire to do all of that. I'm able to carry on my pedophile ring because I have unlimited resources. I have unlimited resources because I am able to get people who themselves originally had these unlimited resources to grant them to me. Why would they grant them to me? Because I grant them indulgences in my pedophile ring, which I then can hold over their heads as blackmail. That's why they give me lots of money, and that's why I have, one, money to perpetuate this ring and bring in new targets into this ring. I guess in a way, I'm sure that the people involved in this now think of themselves. I'm one of the real victims of Jeffrey Epstein. He was blackmailing me the whole time, except it was really a buy-in system. You were basically told up front, you will be blackmailed in exchange for my granting you this otherwise impossible illegal gift of human trafficking and your indulgence in it. But I mean, it all feeds back into the same thing. Why would Epstein be interested in those government secrets? Because he could profit from them. And if he could profit from them, he could use them to build an even larger ring, extracting yet more opportunities to steal more money from more people who he would also blackmail to continue to do so by involving them in his pedophile ring. Not that they were unwilling or anything like that. They were. But it's more than just, oh, well, they got him on something else like Al Capone. Now, they got him on the same activity. It was all related. So I can tell you a little bit about what Helen Lewis has written up here for The Atlantic on this subject, and just a little bit about it. Although I'm sure we could read you the rest from Instapaper, but we'll give you a flavor of it before we move on to a couple other subjects. On Tuesday, November 30th, 2010, at 2:57 p.m., remember, this is about forwarding an email, Prince Andrew, as he was then known, received details of his own upcoming trips as Britain's official trade envoy. Someone, here's what you're going to do, dude. This is the way princes live. I don't know. What is it that I have to do today? Well, someone will email you. All right, fine. I'll go do that, and then I'll do pedophilia later. Well, then he was supposed to go to Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Vietnam, and Singapore. 2:57 p.m. he gets this stuff. At 3:02 p.m. he forwarded the entire email to Jeffrey Epstein. Now you might also think, well, just for your own safety, sir, they may say to you, you should not tell everyone or really anyone all of the stops and what your itinerary is, because someone might want to harm you or whatever, or just make trouble for you in general. And of course, in fact, that's exactly what was happening. But he was thinking, no, that's not what's happening. He's giving me, access to his pedophile ring. I like that. I want that. But in fact, he was harming you and harming others, but you just didn't see it that way. But this is one of the reasons why you're not supposed to share this information. At dawn today, it was yesterday now, that stupid and unethical decision, and many others like it, finally caught up with him. Police arrested Andrew, here's the answer, Mountbatten Windsor. It's MW. It's in alphabetical order. That's the way we can remember it. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. On the morning of his 66th birthday, a fact that I think escaped me yesterday anyway. Happy birthday, Andrew. Whatever. That, of course, the arrest on suspicion of misconduct in public office. A little vague sounding. And they're now searching his homes. Prosecutors have not yet released specific charges, which are thought to relate to Andrew passing on sensitive government information to Epstein. The offense carries a maximum sentence of life imprisonment. Well, that'll do it. No word on meal service or whether or not it involves labor. And everything involves labor in the UK, but not the penalties. They're not on the same page as Korea with that one. His brother, who, as it turns out, a fabulous guy, King, as Trump put it yesterday, King Charles III, was not officially informed in advance, but had signaled that the royal family would cooperate with any police inquiry. And I guess that's the only position you can really take here. There's more. Charles had already stripped Andrew of his title, as you know, after the latest batch of Epstein files dropped because the newly released emails proved beyond doubt, reasonable or otherwise, that Andrew had lied about breaking off contact with Epstein, a convicted sex offender, in 2010. The disgraced former prince And by the way, I mean, I guess King Charles is something of a disgraced former prince too, but not disgraced in exactly the same way. And he went, instead of from prince to no one, from prince to king, as designed. The disgraced former prince had also been evicted from his lavish residence in Windsor, just outside of London, where he had lived effectively rent-free for many years. And basically the king saying, look, we're not going to get in the way of this. It's sad for us. It's a rotten, terrible thing to have happen to your family, but it happened, and we're not going to hold ourselves out as above the law in this instance right now. Okay. So, it's interesting, to say the least, but I thought this was a great opportunity to remind ourselves that it's interrelated, and it wouldn't necessarily be accurate to say that he was arrested either on unrelated charges or charges not directly tied to his sexual misconduct. They really ought to be understood as directly tied to his sexual misconduct. There's really no other reason why he would have shared that information with Epstein. What Epstein was going to do with it, I can't be certain of the actual details of it, but surely he intended to profit off of it in some way. Whether that's, as simple as saying, all right, you're going to be in Hong Kong that time. Well, I know somebody in Hong Kong that you should meet. For business purposes, let's say, not even necessarily directly with respect to his weird participation in the pedophile ring. They may be merged, but essentially he was looking to, shore up his network, build it, grow it, extract more money from it. And the reason that Andrew would share that information, he may think I'm sharing it with this guy because he's a friend of mine and he wants to be able to connect me with other prominent people in the business world, and this is supposed to be an economic trip or whatever, or something like that. But it may also be, the truth of it is that somewhere at some level, he's like, well, he's my friend because he helps me indulge in the pedophilia I seem to enjoy. That's not a friend, that's an enabler, and you shouldn't confuse the two, and you really shouldn't be involved in any of this. And to the extent that he introduced you to business people, even if they made deals that were in the interest of the UK somehow, I don't know, by accident, that's not necessarily where those deals should be landing. They're only landing there by virtue of the fact that you two have an improper relationship. Even if there was no pedophilia going on, you shouldn't be making deals like this with your pals, your buddies. I understand that that's the way a lot of things work, but part of the civic society thing that we're supposed to be preserving here is that deals are made because they're in the best interest of your country, and they're made at arm's length, and they happen, if they happen, among people who know one another and are friends, but because they're substantively good deals. So, you should be looking out for that. That's the sort of thing that you want to be preserving in our civil society. I see that there was I'm very fascinated about how these Apple News alerts happen because they disappear so quickly. It's almost as if they don't want you to know what the actual news was. But as I understand it, you're probably seeing this information flashing across your screen right now. Here's one from Kyle Griffin, who was watching. Everybody's watching the Supreme Court today for decisions being handed down this Friday morning. U.S. Supreme Court rules against Trump's global tariffs enacted under a federal law meant for national emergencies. It's the expected outcome, although I think we were all holding our breath against the possibility that the Supreme Court would just invent a doctrine to preserve this. This will throw everything into disarray, of course. Not Democrats in disarray this time, but Republicans in disarray. And especially of interest will be how they unravel the interests that those who actually shelled out the tariffs will have in getting those monies returned to them. At some point, they did once ask the White House, whatever that happy smiling guy, is it Kevin? Is it Hassett or something like that? Who anyway went on the air and said, well, if this happens and the Supreme Court says that the tariffs were illegal, well, people will be able to get their money back. They'll be able to petition for a refund. And they asked, well, who would get those refunds? Well, the people who paid the tariffs, of course. And so they said, Now, I thought you said that the foreign countries were paying all those tariffs. You're saying that we would, as a result of this, finding it illegal, Trump's illegal actions would result in the federal government, the federal treasury, having to make direct payments to foreign governments now? Even people, not just foreign governments, but remember, Trump put all those tariffs in place to penalize the foreign governments with which he had particular problems, who had ripped us off all these years, or were treating us very unfairly, or doing something terrible out there that they had to be punished for. Now the Treasury will be cutting checks to those countries. Well, yeah, I mean, I guess they would be, except there really won't be. The truth is that they'll be paying back the importers of all these goods, and generally speaking, corporate entities who had to pay extra import costs to get the goods that they wanted to bring to market. It's actually not that difficult to track all of that down because there's paperwork that went with all of it, allegedly. I hope, right? Don't pay these things unless there's at least receipts for them. But this, of course, contradicts everything they had to say about who was actually paying the tariffs. Well, it'll be interesting to see how they unravel things. That ought to be like the biggest news of the cycle, you would think. Hi, everybody. It's me, David, still your host for the Kagro in the Morning Show after all these years. Thank you for all your continuing support for the show. And if you're listening regularly and still thinking about getting on board as a supporter, well, the time is now. Patreon.com is the easiest way to make recurring subscription-style payments every month, all year round, to keep us going. Patreon.com/KagroX brings you to our page where you can sign up with your monthly support. And hey, have you seen our clever new subscription tiers? It's easier than ever to sign up for, say, $1 crisp bill for every information-packed 2-hour show. If you're the plan ahead type, there's even a year-long subscription program that saves you 15% on the cover price. Or it would if there was a cover price, or even a cover, for that matter. Patreon.com/KAGROX. Thanks again for all your support. All right, welcome back, everyone, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Oh, my goodness. Occurs to me that I should probably have brought some more supplies to the table, but we'll see if we can't limp through this last segment and inform you the best we can for the weekend coming up. It sounds like feels like I could really use that couple days off and try and square things away physically before coming back on Monday. We'll see you on Monday, I'm sure. Nonetheless, I said I was going to jump out of the Atlantic article here, but as I'm skimming forward here, it looks like our author actually does a pretty good job, Helen Lewis, in explaining once again why, and I think people got mad at her possibly, having just read the headline, that she was somehow downplaying the arrest, that it wasn't an arrest, strictly speaking, for sexual misconduct. But I don't know. Maybe it's just my reading of it, but it feels like she's getting at some of the nuance of why you shouldn't separate these issues. It goes on after describing the statement of the king saying, look, we're not going to get in the way of this investigation, even though it's harmful to the family. But then continues on. In the United States, of course, the Epstein affair is still seen primarily as a sex scandal, and it is. Right. But the financier, Epstein, was well known as a man who could easily find women, and apparently, it says here, quote, no one over 25 and all very cute, he told Elon Musk, for instance, to go on dates with his rich friends. Pro or civilian Steve Tisch, a co-owner of the New York Giants, asked about one such woman. You get some sense of what these guys expected from the arrangement. It is what you thought it was. But here in Britain, this is a corruption scandal, and not just because Andrew sent Epstein confidential information about investment opportunities in Afghanistan. Apparently that's what this was chiefly about. The police recently searched 2 addresses linked to Peter Mandelson, a former government minister and an ambassador to Washington, that's us, who also lied about the extent of his friendship with Epstein. During his time in government in the late 2000s, the files show, Mandelson forwarded market-sensitive emails to Epstein, that of course is what he's looking for, on subjects such as the Eurozone bailout of Greece, mixed in with laddish banter, haha, that's locker room talk for Americans, and discussions about how Mandelson might make money after leaving office. Yeah, it's all about money, of course, so he can continue to buy and pay his way into the pedophile ring. Mandelson had already been stripped of his seat in the House of Lords and his affiliation with the Labour Party. For a few hours, many in the press corps thought the scandal might bring down Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who had bafflingly appointed Mandelson as U.S. ambassador despite his long record of other scandals. In the end, Starmer's chief of staff, who had recommended Mandelson for the job, stepped down instead. I don't know. We'll see how long that lasts. The allegations against Andrew date from a similar period when he was trade envoy for the British Foreign Office. That job turned out to involve flying around the world in high style. That's what princes do. Often to places run by oligarchs, dictators, and fellow royals on the basis that they would be flattered to deal with a prince. Actually, sort of early neo-royalism. Except regular royalism. Once there, he might also take opportunity to, say, watch a Formula One race or have a few rounds of golf. Attractive young women seem to have been present at many of these events. Foreign intelligence services must have regarded Andrew's appointment in 2001 as a gift from the heavens. Everyone knew that this stank. At the time, I worked for the Daily Mail, a right-wing tabloid, says Helen Lewis, which ran near-weekly stories on the latest questionable Andrew news. In 2007, for example, he sold his white elephant of a mansion, Sunninghill, which his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, had given him as a wedding present. A Kazakh oligarch paid millions over the asking price and then never moved in. Sounds pretty Trumpy. It's weird that they should all get the same real estate sales ideas, somehow. And also be connected personally, somehow. The problem for the royal family was that Andrew and his then-wife Sarah, known in Britain as Fergie, after her unmarried name, had no discernible talents but extremely expensive tastes. The journalist Andrew Lowney's book on the couple, entitled... It's funny. What's the title? No, that's it. This is like the Who's On First of books. It's entitled. Get it? Anyway, the book recounts how Sarah used to run up room service bills in hotels and then simply walk out. She would just breeze out of the Four Seasons and the Palace in New York as if she was too important to pay. One source told him. The couple separated in 1992, but Sarah continued to use her title, the Duchess of York, to boost her commercial ventures. In 1995, Buckingham Palace refused to pay off any more of her debts and issued a statement saying that the Duchess's financial affairs are no longer Her Majesty's concern. So, in other words, up until 1995, it really was true that she could walk out without paying because someone else would take care of it. After this, despite making millions of dollars from her series of children's books, Fergie went crawling to Epstein for loans. I'm writing books for your girls. She wrote in 2010, "Is there any chance I could borrow $50,000 or $100,000 US to help get through the small bills that are pushing me over? Had to ask." The files also contain a particularly grim exchange after Fergie denounced Epstein following his convictions, only to email him in a panic afterward, assuring him that she never used the P word, pedophile. Both she and Andrew were tethered to Epstein by their greed and entitlement. They wanted millionaire lifestyles. More than that, they felt that they deserved them. Why? Because of an accident of birth in one case and a fortuitous marriage in the other. But I mean, it's all the same, really. Accident of birth, fortuitous marriage. They're all, that's the game. We're not supposed to think that anymore, but it is. The couple have been divorced for 3 decades, but have never really moved on, possibly because they are mirror images of each other. Entitled... The book also makes a compelling case that Andrew is, to put it delicately, boorish and dim. It's entirely possible that he never questioned why Epstein would work so assiduously to maintain their friendship. One was a good chap, wasn't one? See, that's why he's my friend. As trade envoy, Andrew became known for practical jokes and off-color remarks, which British diplomats had to tolerate because of his titles. Until 2022, he also benefited from the protection of his mother. Andrew was widely perceived to be the late Queen's favorite child. That's odd. Charles was sensitive, unlike his parents, who had been raised as emotionally stunted aristocrats. Anne, a tougher, horse-mad child, was Prince Philip's pet. Edward, like many youngest children, benefited from his parents' softening with middle age. But no one really knew what to do with Andrew, who was nicknamed Baby Grumpling because of his temper. Not a good addition to the problems he's got already. Like his nephew Prince Harry, he seems to have been most secure when in the tight-knit and hierarchical world of the military. Unlike Harry, though, he frequently reminded his peers of his royal status and was unable to make real friendships with people he considered below him. Over the years, the late Queen had repeatedly smoothed Andrew's way in life, but even she could not save him after his disastrous decision to give an interview to the BBC in 2019 about his connection with Epstein. He presented a portrait of blithe privilege, denying a deep connection with the financier by saying he had hosted him only for a straightforward shooting weekend, as everybody does, right? He claimed to have spent 3 days with Epstein in New York in 2010 for the sole purpose of breaking off their friendship. This was unbelievable at the time. I was going to say, no, it wasn't, but I just misread it, and has now been debunked by the latest files. Keep in close touch, and we'll play some more soon, 4 exclamation points. A 2011 email from Andrew declares the revulsion at his appearance on the BBC prompted his mother to strip him of his ceremonial titles and retire him as a working royal. Anyway, there's a bit more, of course, but you get the sense of how and why we should all feel quite comfortable regarding any of the related charges as covering all of the related charges. They don't happen one without the other. Though Andrew, I guess, to justify his behavior, tried to separate it, it was clear to everybody else, well, it's not just that he's your friend. He's your friend because he's exploiting your position for his financial gain, which he's also using to pay for the pedophile ring that keeps you thinking he's your friend. It's all of a piece. So even if it doesn't involve right now charges of sexual misconduct, this is an easy way into unraveling all of those problems. It won't solve anything by itself, but it may end up putting him where he belongs for closely related reasons, let's say. Okay, so other pieces of news that I ought to catch you up on. This most likely Greg will get to on Monday, but I thought I would mention for you that the status of Virginia's redistricting referendum, it passed the legislature, which means that we get a ballot initiative approving or giving us the opportunity as voters to approve the redistricting scheme. At the moment, Democracy Docket reports a judge in Virginia has blocked, once again, the Democrats' redistricting referendum. We'll see whether there's any word on what the justification is. It's certainly not the last word on things. A county judge in Virginia has blocked voters from deciding whether Democrats can redraw the state's congressional map to counter mid-decade partisan GOP gerrymanders in other states. Tazewell County Judge, and I'm not certain of the pronunciation, even though it's in my own state. It could be Tazewell, Tazewell. Tazewell County Circuit Court Judge Jack Hurley Jr. was appointed by former Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell, he who got the Supreme Court to redefine the meaning of the word bribery, essentially, in order to spring him from the clink, granted a motion that the Republican National Committee filed on the previous day. Hurley's order, which he initially issued from the bench during an emergency hearing on Thursday, marks the latest development in the Democrats' attempt to pass a constitutional amendment that would allow the Virginia General Assembly to redraw congressional districts if other states engage in mid-decade redistricting, and they have. Democrats pursued the amendment in response to nationwide Republican gerrymanders initiated by President Donald Trump, who is seeking to stem GOP losses in the 2026 midterms. It's worth mentioning, and I'm sure they know this at Democracy Docket. Yes, the current spate of redistricting is prompted by Trump's insistence, but it follows in a tradition now a few decades old of other Republicans demanding mid-decade redistricting to gain partisan advantage. He's not the first to do it. But there's really never been any response from Democrats, with the possible exception of the passage of state laws requiring that their redistricting be done by nonpartisan or non-legislative panels, and trying to take it out of the hands of the very politicians who would benefit from the redistricting, even though, essentially, it is ended up coming out just like you might expect, that basically Republicans reserve to themselves the right to do it on a partisan basis where it helps them, and Democrats, high-mindedly enough, say things ought not to be done that way. They ought to be done on a nonpartisan basis. So in Democratic states, we'll be doing it that way. Never actually answering fire with fire, essentially saying we'll answer fire with neutrality. So at worst, Republicans could expect that Democratic states would ignore Republican partisan interests and Democratic partisan interests in doing their redistricting, while Republican states continue to do it in the Republican interest. You know, like basically redistricting by Sunday talk show. A whole bunch of Republicans and no Democrats present. Anyway, Democrats pursued, though, their own terms, thanks to Louise Lucas here in, I think largely, here in Virginia. And we were all getting set to vote. As a matter of fact, in watching the Olympics over the past 2 weeks, I've been flooded with, I was pleased to see, television advertisements in favor of the amendment. And I think very cleverly and well worded, just the way Republicans probably would be doing it. Now we're answering the challenge of partisan Republican redistricting in other states that look to push Democratic representation out of Congress, and we're giving the people of Virginia the chance to vote on it. And that's why they say in the ad, Democrats, Republicans, and independents are all getting ready to vote in favor of this fantastic constitutional amendment. There's no evidence of anybody in particular saying what they were going to do. I guess there are certainly people endorsing it. I haven't seen, there probably are one or two Republicans who said, yeah, I'll vote for it too. And so that enables them to do it. But I like that they've made such a broad claim. We're all going to be on the side of this thing. Anyway, after passing Virginia's Democratic-controlled legislature last month, the amendment must now be approved by a majority of Virginia voters. The referendum is scheduled to take place on April 21st, or I guess the voting ends on April 21st because there's also early voting beginning in early March. So there's not a lot of time to settle this judicial question. Joined by the National Republican Congressional Committee and two GOP members of Congress, the RNC claimed in its lawsuit on Wednesday that the amendment was unconstitutional and the ballot question for the referendum was misleading. So it's interesting. Unconstitutional in what sense? Federal Constitution, state Constitution? Because this is an amendment to the Constitution. I mean, it's unconstitutional now. That's why we're having an amendment. The quick turnaround between the RNC's request and Hurley's temporary restraining order wasn't surprising. Tazewell County is a jurisdiction heavily favored by the GOP. Hurley also declared Democrats' special session on redistricting null and void in response to a lawsuit filed by Republican state lawmakers just last month. In a written order following Thursday's hearing, Hurley barred state officials from administering, preparing for, taking any action to further the procedure of the referendum, or otherwise moving forward with causing an election to be held on the proposed constitutional amendment. However, Hurley was quickly overruled by the Virginia Supreme Court, which said that the redistricting vote could go forward. It was an interesting attempt. A county judge says, we're not going to allow the state legislature to meet and decide what it wants to do. Yeah, that'll probably get overturned. And it did. Democrats slammed Hurley's previous ruling as being the product of court shopping. So far, the GOP has redrawn congressional maps to favor Republicans in Texas, Ohio, Missouri, and North Carolina. That would seem to be the triggering event that was necessary. The party is also pursuing redistricting in Florida and potentially other states. So there you go. You're more or less up to date on that. We're probably going to have to wait till Monday to get good journalistic digestions of the tariff issue. But hey, that gives us time to poke around on a few other interesting items that might be of interest to consider for the weekend. I'm going to go a little further afield, although this is a great essay and it seems like fun and a good Friday article, but if we get to it, we get to it. But in the meantime, this I thought was an interesting observation also observed on Blue Sky and linked to an article in Le Monde, in the French publication Le Monde, which I don't know whether it's in French or not. I guess we could take a look. I don't think it is, or at least the notice to me about the cookies is in English anyway. But yeah, okay, it's in English, but in Le Monde, an op-ed that isn't all that long. But here I think we might be better off at looking at the Blue Sky thread summarizing the story. It is from Joe, oh boy, how do we pronounce your name, Joe? Joe Cirincione. Looks to be an Italian last name, although he's been working on national security in Washington for over 40 years. American guy with an Italian surname, and I hope I got it right. Cirin, Cione, Cirincione, I hope, or somewhere close to that. Anyway, worked in government and think tanks, philanthropy, now retired, still writing, and good thing too, because this is a fascinating point that he makes in the article and then summarizes for us on Blue Sky. On Blue Sky, it's a thread about his article in Le Monde, which was published just the other day. It's behind a paywall, but I would like to share a few of the key points, and I guess he found a way around the paywall because it doesn't look like it's behind a paywall. But if it is, then we're better off reading from the thread. No, it is behind, at least partially behind a paywall. Okay, so we'll stick to the thread. Here's the story. I'd like to share a few of the key points. He says, I've been lecturing and writing on pieces for this for a few months. And this, the article, is my most complete exposition, but I hope to turn it into an even longer piece soon. Everyone loves an even longer piece. The title of the piece, by the way, is Today, 96% of the world's nuclear weapons are held by states with authoritarian leaders. Wow. That's actually, I think at this point now fairly obvious, but I don't think it's hit us in the face quite as directly as well, that title. That's the title of the piece, not just the main point of the piece, but yeah. The core point, he says, is that it is not new technologies or new nations wanting nukes or China's arsenal that defines nuclear dangers today. It's that almost all nuclear weapons in the world are controlled by authoritarian leaders. Now that we've gone authoritarian, that'll do it, right? Our theories, postures, and strategies were not designed for this world. Another instance where all of our thinking prior to this new situation is outdated and doesn't take into account the current realities of the world, right? All sorts of, think about all the nuclear doctrine that you know about, whether it's mutually assured destruction or the general thrust of non-proliferation. And that's kind of fallen apart in the last couple of decades. Well, I'll just let him make his point. So why, he begins by asking, did the New START treaty die? Because it didn't work? No. Arms control has worked to reduce arsenals and threats for decades. It's because two strongman leaders don't want the restraints of arms control treaties. For them, their power and wealth is advanced through military might, not a piece of paper. They are not alone. And of course, we're talking now about we've come to terms with the idea that Russia has been, maybe always has been, an authoritarian state. But we were the anti-authoritarian state. We were the democracy and the leader of the free world, and we had the other biggest nuclear arsenal. They had to deal with us. And now, of course, these two authoritarian leaders, Trump and Putin, don't feel like they need to have any kind of nuclear agreement because there's an understanding possibly between them that they won't be using their nuclear arsenals against one another, unless, of course, they do. But either way,
neither one of them can abide by a limitation on their power. It used to be one authoritarian versus one free state, and they were poised to destroy one another in nuclear conflagration. And so you could bring an authoritarian around to, well, maybe there's a way for me to continue to be an authoritarian but still limit the number and types of nuclear weapons I have because the free guys are demanding it. Now nobody's demanding it. So, another great point. They're not alone, these two authoritarians with nuclear arsenals. Today, for the first time in history and of the nuclear age, 7 of the nuclear-armed states have authoritarian leaders. Russia, China, North Korea, India, true, Pakistan, yes, Israel, and now the U.S. The UK and France are the only true liberal democracies with nuclear arsenals remaining. And they're not sizable by comparison, I would add. We had gotten used to authoritarian regimes acquiring nuclear weapons, North Korea, right, or others, all the really, basically, most of that list now, right? But now it's kind of operating in a different way. We've gotten used to authoritarian regimes acquiring nuclear weapons. Now, nuclear weapon states are acquiring authoritarian regimes. Oh, that's a good point. What happens to our theories in a world where 96% of the world's nuclear weapons are held by states with authoritarian leaders? The core rationale for having nuclear weapons was that democracies needed them to deter reckless expansionist authoritarian states. We were the good guys in this, apparently. We supposedly had the moral values that made us responsible stewards of the most horrible weapons humans have ever invented. But what happens when once democratic nations are controlled by strongmen who reject morality and legal restraints? Oh, that's a good question. We've not begun to grapple with this issue. For example, is it moral to build nuclear weapons for dictators, for wannabe dictators? Should we allow an authoritarian to have his finger on the nuclear button with sole unfettered authority to launch a nuclear war on his whim? Tell me what you think, he invites us to do. And then, of course, to read the article, we'll once again link to that. And he says, by the way, check out our discussion of this on Deep State Radio last week. They have their own podcast, that too linked here. And listen to this discussion on the Martin DeCaro podcast and Substack. Lots of links where he has discussed this with others. Let's see. Is another comment appended by someone else here. Positive Peace Edits, who says another relevant question to reflect on is why we have more oversight, albeit imperfect, over many high-stress, high-responsibility civilian and military roles, but no comparable formal safeguards for political leaders with the power to deploy violence at mass scale. That is to say, mental fitness assessments as a form of checks and balances. We have them in place for military and civilian roles besides the presidency, for instance. But the presidency, immune from so many things, apparently immune from that as well. So anyway, yeah, the Le Monde article, you can see the introduction, and it may be that we're able to get around the paywall, but it gets a little more highly technical and weedy as you get into the meat of the article, and we don't have the time to go over it, of course, but I'll give you a link, and maybe you want to try your favorite way around the paywall. Or maybe you want to subscribe to Le Monde. I don't know. But something to think about and make you panic for the weekend. Sure, why not? And one or two other items, maybe one other item I might be able to pique your interest on for the weekend as we look to make our exit here. The alarm's gone off. The Guardian reporting or bringing you this piece. Let's get the pop-up out of the way. U.S. funding for global internet freedom effectively gutted. Is that important? Do we worry about this? Some good points made about this. Aisha Down writing this just yesterday. The program, which they spell funny, that funds groups building tech to evade oppressive government controls is now under serious threat. For nearly 2 decades, the U.S. quietly funded a global effort to keep the internet from splintering into fiefdoms, how do we pronounce that? Run by authoritarian governments. Uh-oh, them again. I knew they would cause some problems. Now that money is seriously threatened, that money is seriously threatened, and a large part of it is already gone, putting into jeopardy internet freedoms around the world. And remember, of course, that this was all led, or some of the elimination of it anyway, led and financed by Mr. Free Speech absolutist warrior himself, Elon Musk. Oh well. Managed by the U.S. State Department and the U.S. Agency for Global Media, the program, broadly called Internet Freedom, funds small groups all over the world, from Iran to China to the Philippines, who build grassroots technologies to evade internet controls imposed by their governments. It has dispensed well over $500 million in the past decade, according to an analysis by The Guardian, including $94 million in 2024. Then came DOGE, Donald Trump's Department of Government Efficiency, tasked with reducing the size of U.S. government agencies and initiatives. Career employees who staffed internet freedom resigned or were sacked in 2025 as part of larger reductions. Many of its programs were cut permanently. Its main granting office issued no money in 2025. The Open Technology Fund, a nonprofit that works with the government to direct roughly half of this money, won a lawsuit to get some of the funding restored in December. The Trump administration, of course, now appealing that ruling. So another place to look in on things. And in the meantime, on the private sector side, I did see something the other day about now that the European governments were cracking down on what Grok and the folks at Twitter were enabling on its weirdo platform. They were building essentially virtual private networks to allow people to get around the good kind of restrictions from foreign governments. The kind that
You've been listening to
prevented
in the morning with David Waldman.
the distribution of the child sexual materials and the like. So interesting that on the private side, they're enabling that to get around, and on the public side, decimating the ability to actually disseminate good information to repressed societies. Wow, that's a lot. Justice Putnam has more next, and we'll see you next week.